Hello, everybody, wherever you are in the world. Good morning for some of you, good afternoon, or good evening. My name is Viola Edward, a lover of breathwork and of psychotherapy. And it's my honor and pleasure today to be talking about these two subjects that are so important in my life. And I am who I am because I did psychotherapy as a patient and I discovered breathwork, and that joined all what I have studied and done in my life and had helped me to get over many situations of my life and to become the person that you see today. So whatever I can do to encourage you to go into therapy and to go into breathwork, I will be doing. And in these months, that is May is the month of awareness for mental health, and I call it clarity for mental fitness. What about to talk about that clarity and mental fitness and breathwork? And for this reason, I have invited my dear colleague, Jim Morningstar. He's my colleague, he's my teacher, he's my friend, and somebody I love dearly. And both of us, we met in IBF in 1999. And since then, we have a beautiful relationship of colleagues and exchanging a lot of information and doing many things together. I want to tell you a little bit about IBF. The International Breathwork Foundation, IBF, is a nonprofit global network of people using conscious breathing for health, well-being, and personal growth, with members in 42 countries worldwide. It was created in 1994, and since 2016, IBF has a special consultative status for Social Economic Council of the UN. It supports the 2030 global goal through different action: mental health and well-being, SDG 3, education, because we have the conscious breathing in the classroom, and conscious breathing for trauma recovery, science and research partnership with other organizations, and World Breathing Day on April 11, to spread the awareness of the importance of conscious breathing around the world and the importance of clean air as a vital importance for the entire humanity. And one of the SDG that we support very much is the number 17, because we believe that in partnership and in alliance, caring alliance, we're gonna make it together, so nobody is left behind. And welcome, Jim. Jim Morningstar, PhD, is the Director of Transformations Incorporated in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Has held license as a clinical psychologist since 1973. He is a clinical supervisor, seminar leader, and has pioneered in the development of therapeutic breathwork. He founded the School of Integrative Psychotransformations in 1980, and the Transformation Breathwork Training Program in 1990. He has authored 5 books in the field of integrative psychology. He is co-director of the Global Professional Breathwork Alliance, that I'm part of the board. Jim teaches internationally, and he really is for us whenever we need him. And I tell you something, now it's 8:30 in the morning there where he lives. So welcome, Jim, to this conversation that we're gonna have together about mental health fitness in all areas of life, in the workplace, in our life, in all areas of society. Welcome.
Well, I am thoroughly delighted to be here with you, Viola, and for many reasons. One is what you already mentioned, is our dear friendship that we have with one another. And we must recognize, of course, that this friendship came about because of the IBF, the International Breathwork Foundation, which came about because of breathwork and our love of how breathwork infuses health, well-being, vitality, spiritual awareness in all areas of our life. And so we have that common background together, and we have a common interest in spreading the value of breathwork around the world as not only practitioners of breathwork, but also people who have been involved in the mental health field for most of our careers. You have done
Indeed.
so much work with addictions and bringing breath work as an adjunct to the field of healing addictions and many other areas of mental health yourself. So you are truly a friend and a dear colleague. And it's my honor to be with you this morning to talk about the subject that's favorite to us.
Exactly. We can talk for hours. And also something that is very particular about breathwork mentors is because we have gone through so many experience and through our training, professional training, and we will be talking about it. We really learn how to make what is implicit to our experience to make it explicit to our student and to our client. So with a structure and with a methodology set so they can take it with them home. So it's so important, the autonomy that conscious connected breathing has, that after you do certain package of session, in many cases are 10 to 12 session, you really can practice it by yourself. And I remember when I entered into the breathwork world, I felt so empowered by that. Of course, you train and you have your breath worker or your therapist or your mentor for as long as you want. But can you imagine that you learn a technique and you can take it home with you and you can take it wherever you go? Because as positive psychotherapy said, positive is coming from positum, and positum means what is there, what is given. So with the learning of the conscious connected breathing, you increase your positum to be able to deal with challenges of life. And because life will take us out of balance, isn't it, Jim? And then we have to learn and go back to balance. So you as a psychologist, how is it that you did combine? Because of course I came much after you and I have teacher like you that make the path easy for me. But how is it that you combine these great methodologies together? I mean, how was your beginning? How is it all the challenges, or at least two of the challenges you faced back then when you merge breath work or conscious connected breathing into the practice of psychology and psychotherapy?
Well, first of all, from the beginning, I knew that I wanted to work with people. I wanted to work in a helping way with people. And that's why I got into psychology, because it, for me, combined both service in terms of clinical work and also science in terms of something that gave a basis for doing that help, something you could fall back on to make sense out of different symptoms that people had, different illnesses that they would get into. And so I went through my full training as a clinical psychologist, which is 4 years of undergraduate and then 5 years of graduate courses, including a year of internship. But you know what? Well, at the end of that training, I knew something was missing. I knew that I did not want to spend my life sitting in an office and just talking mentally with people about their issues, even though I could see there was usefulness, there was help in it, but it didn't speak to me because you might say the soul of it missed something in it. And so it was not until I came upon the kind of helping work that included the body, the mind, and the spirit that I felt, now this for me is not only brings me together personally, but this is something I would want to share with the world, that I would want to devote my life to. And at first, it was not breath work. At first, it was new advances in the area of psychotherapy, Gestalt therapy, bioenergetic therapy. These were precursors to much of our modern work, but some of those basic principles I still use as a psychotherapist. So first of all, we should make a distinction between psychotherapy and breath work. And psychotherapy is a field of study, a profession based on a certain theory or model of health and wellness. And traditionally, the Diagnostic and Statistic Manual for Mental Health is built upon a categorization of various illnesses and symptoms that people have, which, as rational and logical people, we could say, okay, I see an issue going on with this person, and it's important that we have some tools to address that issue. Now, how this even came about, going back historically, was that before there was the science involved in helping people with mental health issues, it was basically from a religious point of view that people were treated. And back in the days before the 1900s, people were often categorized in religious terms as sinners or people who were saved. And the approach to trying to help people was basically religious. But if we go back even farther than that, religion is there to serve the spiritual nature of the human being. And the metaphysical beginnings of rebirthing and breathwork that Leonard Orr correctly espoused were distress in our human life comes from separation from source. Separation from our source, in a sense, is the original sin and the only sin. If Leonard even went back to the Garden of Eden and talked about our cosmological theory of how humans got separated from source. And that metaphor, the Garden of Eden, is God says to humans, there are two trees in the garden, the tree of life, which you should eat of fully, and you are life. And then there's a tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which is a beautiful tree, and it's wonderful and useful, but it's not who you are. And that knowledge of good and evil is our mind, it's knowledge. So we have knowledge of things, but we are not what we think. We are not the judgments that we can make up, because the mind is always making judgments, good, bad, right, wrong. Okay, we need to use judgments in life. That's a door, that's a window. But when we get into evaluative judgments of good and bad, right and wrong, we separate ourselves from the unconditional love that we are and that we have as human beings. And so what happened in separating ourselves from the Garden of Eden is we began to believe that we are our judgments. Oh, today I'm a good person. Oh, but I'm a bad person today because I didn't feed the cat. Oh, I'm a good person because, And so we get into living life by a series of judgments, good, bad, right, and wrong. Now, what breathwork has done is brought us back to source, because when we breathe, we go back to, no, I'm here right now. I'm not good or bad. I'm breathing right now. I feel pain. I feel, but it's not because I'm a sinner. It's not because I'm an evil person. As I breathe into it, I get back to, well, what is it that has kept me from feeling like a good father or a good husband or a good, I breathe and I bring myself back into awareness of the present moment and the truth of my essential good nature, but also the error of how I have stepped away from my oneness with my children or my spouse or and so there's a beauty there that breath takes us back to our source. But we don't throw out science, because with the Enlightenment era, we discovered that we could both think and be a rational person, but not use reason to condemn people. Because what often happened with people who were in distress and they couldn't find a cure for that by just praying over them or by making them do penance, they were locked away. People with severe distress, or as we'd call it today, trauma, were put in institutions that kept them out of the sight of the rest of humanity because it disturbed us. We didn't know what to do with them. Well, we know now the reason that much of that distress disturbed us, that we didn't know what to do with, is because it was also a mirror of us. And we, with fear of looking at the mirror, wanted to put people away in institutions. Murray Bowen, the psychiatrist who was the father of family therapy, as a resident, did an experiment with a schizophrenic individual, a young man who had schizophrenia. He said, well, rather than putting him in a locked ward in an institution, let's get a family to volunteer to be in the ward, and we'll observe what's happened rather than just this person exhibiting unusual symptoms or bizarre behaviors. Well, when he put the whole family on the ward, it wasn't very long till he understood why this young man was acting the way he was. Look at the context. Look at the dysfunctional communication that was going on.
Will that be matching what Abraham Maslow said? To explore the internal labyrinth of the mind, body, spirit, and emotion, we should not work with the psychology of the dysfunctional. What is needed is a psychology of freedom, with the appropriate tools to find our own truth and help others to find theirs.
Exactly, because where science and spirituality went afoul is getting wrapped up in judgments again. Healthy people versus unhealthy people, right? So what Murray Bowen does is he began to look at the whole system. Rather than making a judgment of sick and healthy, let's look at an entire system and see how it functions and how we can have people function in a more loving and effective way with one another. So, so the merging then of breath work with the science that had gotten sidetracked by just judgments, which still led to good or bad people, healthy or sick people, now they were called, versus good or bad people, was, okay, let's look at them with the eyes of wholeness or unconditional love. And let's also see what is going on in the system of how they live. And so we will go with a loving approach to restore the wholeness that is the essence of the person. The person is not born dysfunctional. The person is not, in essence, an aberration. So this is when I got back into saying, now I can put the pieces of my own personal puzzle together. I can have a systematic approach to working with people, using tools that are effective, but also doing it in a way that is unconditionally loving. The tool I say is the major one of breathworkers is holy vision. Of course, the major tool is breath, loving breath, but beyond that, using the mind and training the mind to see people as already whole. So
Yes.
when we say mental health, well, we mean emotional health and physical health, and we mean the whole ball of wax. But to train the mind is, I think, the essence of bringing breath work and psychotherapy together. Because
Isn't it as Eric Bernes say also that we were all born okay, and then it's in that time that when we felt that energy are feeling threatened or something we're not getting, and we go into fear, and then we start creating all this transactional communication even before we start talking. But all of us, we are okay until, and this okayity, it will be returned if we find the good tool and the good method. And of course, as breath worker, we said, and if we breathe it in and out.
exactly. And that's the approach when we're approaching a person as essentially okay or essentially whole. Um, they experience that. And even though they still have pain or discomfort, they partner with the coach or the therapist to return to wholeness, something that they already own and have, rather than they're kicked out of the Garden of Eden. They're a sinner, they're a bad person, there's something essentially wrong with them, and they've got to prove themselves. They've got to somehow get back into the good graces of Source by showing their worthiness. And we can never do enough work to earn what we already have, what we already are.
Exactly.
So it may sound like semantics, but it's not. It is the essential core of how we are approaching people that makes a difference. Unfortunately, though, people's minds will look for a reason why they're not feeling okay. And if they're given a label, if they're given a diagnosis, often that will become the self-fulfilling prophecy. Oh, I am this way because I am essentially uh, a depressed person. And uh, there's a relief in that it's okay, maybe I'm not bad, uh, maybe it's just I'm chemically imbalanced. And there's a kind of relief that comes with that because it takes away the heavy judgment.
And the
And
responsibility, isn't it also?
it can, exactly. So then the responsibility is given to the doctor to give me the right medication to help balance me. And we go into, it's a friendly collaboration, but it still is putting the responsibility outside of myself, or the power, I should say, outside of myself to heal. Now, the
Well,
credit I give,
isn't it now with many times I said, yeah, that is true. You know, you have seen so many doctors, and it's true. And me too. I have seen so many doctors, and I personally, I have these things from family that I produce very, very high cholesterol, like extremely high. And you know that, but how we're gonna learn to live with what we have in the best way possible? How we're gonna learn to be autonomous, to be empathetic, and to have synchronicity between what we feel, what we think, what we do, what we talk, what we model, how we influence others, independently with the diagnosis. Yeah, because we have, some of us, we have certain diagnosis of something. Let's don't fight with it, but let's see how we live with it. And we always say, you know, like, uh, let's remember that the definition of health is not the absence of the illness, isn't it? Is a combination of being in well-being physically, mentally, and also in connectedness with our meaning of life and the sense that life has for us. So I always think that a healthy person is not the person that will never get ill. You can see how healthy they are, because when they get an accident or they get ill, how much healthy way they come over the illness. Yeah, how much they live the event of the illness, not as a tragedy, to pull them into victimacy and why this and why me and why now and all these things. It's like this event happened to me, and let's see how I use everything I can to be able to manage and to go to balance again, because life has taken me out of balance here, because I fall from the bicycle, or because I get a diagnosis, or because something happened. So this is the way how I see also the health of a person. And I think independently, sometimes I have a client was who is suffered from schizophrenia, and he managed with his illness so well. I used to work it with a colleague, psychotherapist and psychiatrist in my area, and he managed his condition so well that when you will enter to his life, he will tell you, look, I need to tell you something, not to get scared or anything. Just, I have to tell you that I'm with this diagnosis. Don't worry, I'm taking medication. I have the best team of therapists dealing with me. I'm just telling you, if you see me time to time talking by myself, I had these tics time to time because there is a couple of things I'm still dealing with. So please don't worry about me. So I think this is a healthy condition, how we come like all the people that we are in recovery. We say, no, I don't drink. I'm in recovery for 20 years, 3 months and 2 weeks. So it's like we acknowledge what we're going through, but we learn how to live with it, or like people in recovery, how we learn how to live without the object of our addiction. But we can give you a hint about that, so you don't suffer for us. This is my reality. I deal with it. So you enjoy yourself. I'm enjoying myself, and I deal with that reality. Because also, one of my teachers was saying recently is like, he said, let's return to Freud. And he said, Freud said that a healthy person is the person who knows how to work and how to love. And my teacher said, and I'm going to add to that, how to create, because we cannot take creativity out of it. So I think in that matter, how we live our life, how we heal our victimhood and areas that sometimes life created for us, or other created for us, or we created to ourselves, but how we balance, how we get into alignment with the breath work, the whole process is much more dynamic, and it will go in depth, isn't it, Jim?
Yes, you're bringing up a couple of very important points here, Viola. I will give credit to the first psychiatrist from whom I took in graduate school a psychopharmacology class. And he said that the judicious use of medications was simply to help a person bring their resources back into their control enough so that they would take over their life. So a medication was just something that was used as a way to help a person get back into resourcefulness for themselves, not something that they necessarily were going to be needing or taking their whole life. So the labeling of a person, as I said, should be of a condition, not of the person. So even saying a schizophrenic versus a young man who is experiencing schizophrenia may sound like semantics, but it helps puts us back into, no, this is not a schizophrenic. This is not a depressive. This is a person who is experiencing certain things that make their function in the world a challenge. Now, we can go even beyond saying, okay, I have this challenge and it makes me different, but I am doing what I can to fit in, to recognizing that in many early cultures, people who were different were seen as an important part of that culture because they had skills and tools that others in the culture didn't. Many people who now might be labeled as mentally ill were, when they were treated with respect and honored, were shaman. They would see things that other people didn't see, not because they were crazy, but because they were tapped into other elements of reality. And so sometimes if we get too much into our diagnoses and categorizations and trying to make everyone look the same or normal or non-threatening, what we miss is what are the gifts that these people have? What are the, do these symptoms say something more than I have a dysfunction? Do the symptoms maybe reflect back, oh, maybe society has a dysfunction? Maybe the fact that none of us can truly accept and deal with our sadness would make me someone who is poignantly aware of my sadness a threat. So we can go further than just say, well, let's help these people look and appear normal by chemically rebalancing them or tolerating them. Let's look at what are they reflecting for us all.
Yeah.
And that is a whole another approach then that sees equality. And this is why breathwork is, as you say, has been such a revolution, is because it's very democratic. Every one of us has the ability to breathe. Every one of us has the ability to come back to our own source if we are seen that way and given the opportunity to let go of the judgments and the behaviors which will continue to keep us separated and dysfunctional. Now, again, our distinctions between a psychotherapist and a breath worker are important. We need distinctions to live in our society. A psychotherapist has been trained to use certain tools according to a model of health and well-being. Breath worker coaches healthy breathing. Their expertise is in helping a person recognize how they're holding their breath, what are the factors emotionally and mentally which might cause them to constrict. And as we've learned about trauma now, where there are areas that are totally out of our consciousness and that we can't simply go back and say, well, I'm going to address such and such a behavior in my life because it's been out of my awareness. My nervous system was overwhelmed. And so the advent of studying of trauma and knowing that certain things are implicit only memory, that they're out of our awareness, has been a revelation for both psychotherapy and for breathwork. Now we recognize, as we open up the sympathetic nervous system, that there are going to be behaviors that aren't understandable in the left brain, but are fully living in the right brain. And they're causing challenges for us to have a happy life, have a functional life.
And for that, we need to keep that bridge between both hemispheres, the corpus callosum, clear and open, so the information between both hemispheres really function very well. Because if it's obstructed, then there is a separation inside of our brain, isn't it? And this is where so important to do conscious connected breathing. And so
Exactly.
especially from the nose, because it's so important to keep that place open, ready to be I used to have a teacher who said one of our first communication is what happened between right and left hemisphere. And we know in the world of addiction, That it's not like right is good, left is bad. Oh, no, no, both. We have both, and both are so important for us. For example, in addiction, the one who make the game actually is the right, because the left one can say, hey, stop, after the second, after the third, come and put structure. And it's the right one who said, hey, leave me alone. Leave me alone. I want to have fun, and I know how to do it. Yeah. So the idea is how we can really kind of create this transaction between left brain and right brain in a functional way through understanding, knowledge, wisdom, but also to the conscious connected breathing. What do you say?
Absolutely. And both the psychotherapy and the tools that have been learned there can be useful, as well as can the breath itself, which takes us fully back to our origins and our source. And it's like bringing the right and the left brain together.
Indeed. Indeed.
So this was the great revelation for me when breathwork came along, because I had learned bioenergetics from Alexander Lowen, who was a great believer in the breath, but he also used movement and other elements of vitality and aliveness to bring the. He was quite a vital, alive human being himself. I remember getting on an elevator once. I went to study with him, and he just walked on the elevator and it kind of lit up. And he didn't know me from Adam at the time, but he shook my hands and his eyes were bright and he was right there. And wow, he was modeling aliveness. He was modeling presence.
Exactly.
And I say, well, I'm in the right place. This is where I love to be. And so anything that brings that aliveness together, and I say to people in doing breath work, it's also intuition training. It's not mechanical. It's not just you learn to start with your diaphragm and then innervate your costal muscles and then relax on the exhale. Yeah, those are the externals of it. But there's another element to it, which is the je ne sais quoi, that vitality of aliveness there, that is your spirit that you're bringing into it. It's good to have the tools of the mechanical, because you can look, oh, yes, I'm going to see my person that I've got some emotional troubles with, and I can feel my throat starting to constrict and my belly can. No, it's good to have those tools of awareness that, okay, I can be a little more resourceful. I remember we had a loving relationship and then something happened, so I can go back to that. That's putting resourcefulness back into my system, which will help me reconnect with my friend who I have a problem with, or even with a marital partner that I may be estranged from.
Or the parent that we have so much difficulty with as our first parent or carer, as our first authority, huh? And how I can see it very clearly in when I'm doing business consultancy, how we take our problem with authority, started with the parent and the carer and the school, and all these issues that we didn't heal with authority, how we take it to our work, how we take sibling rivalry to our work and to our life and to our in-laws family. Like, is we repeat story and repeat it until we really get awareness of it. For that, I said, hey, you're just one breath away from the best. One breath at a time. We are one breath away of that. Just breathe it in. Let's do it, and let's see it from another perspective and see what belongs to the past and what is it in the present. Yeah.
I have a wonderful image for that, Viola, which came up as you were talking there. It's like I say, we all bring our family dynamics, those original judgments that we made about our helplessness, our abundance, our okayness with our sexuality, all of those little conclusions that become lifelong patterns are in our little coaster wagon, our little wagon that we drag along and take to work with us, or we take to church, or we take to wherever we go. And then we bring those dynamics out there and recreate our family
Yeah.
right there. Well, everyone else is doing the same thing.
Yeah.
So whose family is better? So yeah.
I always remember with my free spirit, is like I was used to be like this person was doing so many things to get my freedom. And if my family was living in the West and I went far east, as far away from from my family was, and find an apartment. And the apartment was like a small apartment part of a house that has little garden, and it was perfect. Guess what? It was 70s or early 80s, and we share the telephone line. And what was my surprise when the owner of my apartment tell me, you can't receive call after 10 p.m. Yeah. I mean, can you imagine? You go and live alone and you get away from, you're free. And it was very interesting because by then I already was in transactional analysis and learning and doing groups. I was 23, 24 years old. But I took that to my group, look, I brought this with me. Like I pay a rent, I went far away, and they are telling me I can't have call after 10 because it will sound in the whole house. And my landlord, who were elderly people, it will be disturbed. But it was so interesting how it come out. Or you cannot light an incense, or you cannot, it's all what you can't, because of course I took it with me wherever I go. And
Well,
that was
exactly. We take our judgments and our reactions and
yes,
those early patterns wherever we go.
yeah,
Now, you could say like, oh, that's horrible. No, it's actually life is telling us you've got a judgment here about authority and freedom, and it's going to show up wherever you go, not because you're helplessly neurotic or because you're sick. It's because life is wanting to help you heal that.
yeah. Apart from the neurosis, yeah. Anyway, Chris, Chris. Anyway, Jim, it's so nice to be. Neurosis is another subject. Shall we talk even 5 minutes about it? What What does it mean? What is it? A neurotic behavior. What does it mean?
Well, to me, it's a repetition of a judgment that has somewhat taken over our life. And I'm so glad you brought this up because even in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, they categorize mental illnesses according psychosis is something that is so taken over a person's life that they cannot function in normal reality. A neurosis is something that has taken over a person's nervous system so that they're still functional. They can still go to work, but there's something that is blocking their full sense of fulfillment and happiness. A personality disorder is a quirk that has somewhat infected, you might say, the person's character and how they behave, which doesn't, which makes them difficult to live with, but they still can be quite successful. And an adjustment reaction is a, is a stance that a person has taken because of something that has happened in their life, and they're adjusting to it. They lost a partner, they got fired from a job, and the natural coping mechanisms of being sad or wanting to be isolated are coming into play. But it's because something we can identify that was happened at a certain point in their life, and with help and support, they'll get over that. So there's all these different categories of how severe a person's functioning is treated them. Now, neurosis can be very deceptive because it's like, well, the person still can go to work, they can still make a living, but boy, they're struggling. They're not happy with it. Their nervous system has taken on certain defense patterns that are very present in their life. And of course, there's very varying degrees of that. some people who might be obsessive compulsive and who can't even leave the house because of the fear of germs or fear. Whereas another person might have that fairly under control, and they prefer not to handshake with you, but they're very friendly, and they say they've compartmentalized it. They're able to use that, put that fear in a category and have coping mechanisms, but still function. Now, with breath work, we can breathe into these things and re-own the energy. See, I don't try to get rid of symptoms. I don't say, well, you've got this bad behavior, let's get rid of all of the thoughts and the feelings around it. No, those thoughts and feelings were held because the nervous system got to a point where I didn't see an escape. It went from fight or flight into freeze. I didn't see an escape from this. So we're not trying to get rid of that energy. We're trying to re-own it. We're trying to take the locks off the door. We're trying to open it up. If you have the concept of getting rid of a symptom, it's like, well, I'm just going to get it out of my life and compartmentalize it as much as possible, and then go on functioning. Yes, I'm a normal person, but of course I'm such and such, depressed or an alcoholic,
Yes.
and we're going to keep it over there because I can handle things life just fine as long as I don't recognize I'm really that in the cellar.
Yes, and then we understand all the violence toward the self and toward others, because will you agree with me that where is a neurotic, there is a co-neurotic or many co-neurotics around? And maybe we don't have directly the awareness of somebody who's dealing with neurosis, but we have in session a lot of people who are dealing with the co-neurotic co-neurosis because they dealt with it in different way, and it come a time that the person said, oh, maybe it's not me, it's him, or maybe it's not me, it's her, or maybe. So people come to work and to see how they can really how they can adjust their reality in the present moment and go out of these whatever is emotional violence or mental violence or physical violence or whatever violence the person who's dealing with co-neurosis goes. So whoever from the family group or from the couple who has the awareness first, don't wait until the one that you think suffering from this or that to come to session. Whoever get the awareness first, please ask for help, because you can impact your relationship, you can impact your family, and you can breathe in energy into your family because you had the awareness and you say, it's not a taboo anymore. Mental health is not taboo. Let's go and work on it. And in this combination of psychotherapy and breath work is such a marvelous thing of working really in all the dimension of a human being. And for that today and many other days, I'm gonna see with Jim if we can do a series of these interview and be back with you to talk about different issues that can really affect our daily life. What I want to tell you today is that mental health, fitness, clarity, to be fit, to be agile with your mental health is your right. Is your human right to ask for help, is your human right to be able to change some behavior that you copy from carer or from parent, and is human right to say, no, I don't want this anymore. And we are, all of us, in different part of the world. You can find breath worker everywhere. And that's going to be my last question for today for Jim, about not only that we are in the IBF, and please go to the website and you will see according to your area. And nowadays we do it online. So even you don't have to find us in your area. We are all at your services, that we work in different languages and we have different methodology. And on top of that, or parallel to that, my dear Jim and our colleague Jessica created in 2001, when was created the
Yes, 2001
GPBA,
was the inauguration.
Global Professional Breathwork Alliance. Since 2001, dear friend has been working to create this infrastructure, this platform for us all to be able to have the guidelines for what is it to be a professional breath worker. What is it? What is it a professional training? Why and how? Do you want to tell us something about the GPBA to finalize our conversation today, Jim?
Absolutely, absolutely. As we began to see, those of us who worked with breathwork for a number of years, because by 2001, breathwork had been around since the 70s in various forms, and we saw the power of the tool. We saw how amazingly effective it could be, but we also, as with any tool, it can be misused. It can be used not necessarily for evil purposes, but I imagine for that too, but mostly through misunderstanding and through a person's lack of training. They are using the tool in a way that doesn't optimize the health of another or even makes their situation worse. So we recognize that we had a responsibility as elders at that time to say, wait a minute, we've been down this road of using breath work and breath work applies to every kind of profession. It's not just mental health workers. Breath work is, and a breath awareness and breath modulation can be used by dentists. It can be used, and we've trained people, but we saw, no, there's a certain wisdom to have training and to learn from others, and also to understand ethics. And we learn this from other professions. If we are going to truly be a profession in the world, we make an agreement with the public, and that's what a profession is. A profession is an agreement amongst a group of practitioners with the general public. And that group of practitioners says, we agree on standards for training. If it's a medical profession, we agree that a person has to have an anatomy course. We agree that if it's a legal profession, we agree that a person has to study the judicial system. And so as breath workers, we agree to a set of standards in training that someone who is going to be a professional and advertise themselves as such have this kind of training and is also aware and trained in ethical use of this tool. And further than that, that as a profession, we will monitor and this, so that if someone says that they have this training, but they don't, no, they can't call themselves certified by the Global Professional Breathwork Alliance. If someone says that they're practicing ethically, but they are not, and we've gone through a process of restorative justice. We don't have a punitive system. We have restorative justice, and it's unresolvable, and that person is unwilling to operate within an ethical realm. No, you cannot advertise yourself as certified by the Global Professional Breathwork Alliance. So we have said we are establishing ourselves as a profession on the face of the earth. It doesn't mean that no one can do breath work unless they belong to this organization. Anyone can do breath work. It's just like anyone can practice medicine, but they can't be listed as a doctor according to the medical association.
Indeed. So, and the beautiful thing about this humanistic platform, holistic, I would call, is that because in your country, maybe you had this type of training or this other type of training, that when you come to the Alliance, we understand that it's not complete. We will offer you different way that you complete it. It's not about yes or not. It's about the various opportunities that you can, as I did in myself as a psychotherapist. I'm a psychotherapist who doesn't have the degree of psychology. For that, I'm somebody who studied all the time, because I'm coming from alternative and non-formal education. So that gives me the awareness that it's very important for me to always be backed up with my study, with my word, with why we keep studying, to be up to our client. Is not only to have that title or to belong to that institution, is to be able to be trained and updated, so we always can give the best service to our clients. So those of us who had less hours training, or we didn't have the opportunity, or like many of us, we did it in a language even that we couldn't understand back then. I still remember once I'm with Leonard and I'm telling him, he come to Venezuela, and I tell him, Leonard, you do this like me, like I do. I discovered it in a session. And he kindly, and as a kind, nurturing parent will do, he said, yes, you saw it in my training. I said, no, I discovered it in that day. He said, then we understood later that I learned so many things when my English was not totally formed technically, and it was stored in my system and slowly was developed later. So like people like me, we did many more training in my own languages later. Yeah. So it's very important. It's not about just to finish a training and start working. This is, and as a mentor, I always remember that mentors, we are there to the service of our mentees, how we can make it possible for them. And that is not something that I learn and is done. It's something that you practice and you learn in your own time and in your own, in the area where you like the most. For that, we don't specialize in everything. We specialize in the area that we like the most, in the area that our grace and our truths come easily. And that's the idea of this organization, as I understand it. And I'm so pleased to be part of it now, too. Always loved it.
We're so pleased to have you,
Part of it.
Viola.
Huh?
You're a true ambassador of breath in many languages, in many cultures, and for both male and female.
Yes, I am. Of course. What has been such a miracle in my life, we just spread it around. And in this time of more and more consciousness about mental health fitness, this is the idea of being talking with my colleague here and dear teacher. So Jim, I want to say, I can stay hours, as you can imagine, with Jim. And let's create another time that we will talk more about psychotherapy and breathwork. And for today, thank you so much for being with me here. And what will be your last, for this time, your inspiring message to all these the people that are watching us and listening to us today?
Well, to follow that inner voice, if you have, for example, a sense of, hey, I'd like to learn a little bit more about this. Oh, I'm very busy. No, listen, go into that inner space and trust your own intuition and listen to where you're called in your life. That's, as Joseph Campbell said, is where your bliss is. Follow your bliss. And breath is just a tool that helps open the door to finding that bliss and that fulfillment and living your purpose. And if it leads you to breath work, Viola and I are here with open arms to support you.
And before I forget, and Jim with my dear friend Omar Shitwi, they are doing a program on training in Arabic. Yalla, yalla. But those of you who want to do it in Arabic with translation or in English, they are going all over the world. And with Omar, they are doing it in Arabic. Yalla, matan true. Go for it. So I should remember this. So I'm so pleased. I'm waiting my time to come and join forces also with them, because I'm looking forward to also work in Arabic. I need a little bit of more courage for that. So, but, and also if you're willing to do the training or any of the thing that dear Jim has done, and many of his beautiful teaching is already recorded, is online. So please follow Jim, follow us in IBF, and be blessed. Viola Edward here, most happy of being with you today in this conversation with my dear Jim Morningstar. Bye-bye for now.
That's you.